I'm Morgan Price, 72 years old, and my story is a hard one, but it's a true one. My son-in-law slid a mop bucket across the Thanksgiving table. "Eat the slop," he smirked. My own daughter, Aisha, laughed. "That's your new diet freeloader." They thought the 72-year-old man they exiled to the attic was finished. They forgot one crucial detail. I owned the house, and what I did next, they never saw coming. Before I tell you how I reclaimed my life, let me know in the comments where you are listening from. Please like and subscribe if you believe that respect is earned, not given. The gray plastic bucket hit the edge of the mahogany dining table. It didn't just land. It was shoved hard, and it made a wet, sloshing sound that cut through the chatter and the background music. It wasn't a serving bowl. It was a mop bucket, the kind you buy at a hardware store for $10. I looked up. My eyes, which have seen blueprints for bridges that span miles, were now focused on this cheap piece of plastic. Kyle, my son-in-law, was grinning. His face was flushed red, partly from the expensive wine I had paid for, and partly from the thrill of his own cruelty. Around the table, his 10 friends, all of them in their early 30s, all of them white, all of them loud, stopped talking. The silence that fell over the room was sudden and heavy. It was the silence of a crowd waiting for the punchline. "Here you go, Morgan," Kyle said. His voice was high and nasal, dripping with a mockery he didn't even try to hide. He shoved the bucket closer, scraping it against the wood finish I had just polished 2 days ago. "We saved a special portion just for you." I didn't move. I just looked inside the bucket. It was everything from the kitchen that hadn't made it to the table. Greasy, translucent potato peels. Scraps of turkey skin, rubbery and pale. The blackened, burnt ends of the green bean casserole. It was all mixed together in a lukewarm, congealed mess. A film of grease floated on top. The smell hit me, next a sour wave of garbage and spoiled wine. It smelled like the bottom of a trash can. I am a 72-year-old man. I am Morgan Price. I worked for 45 years as a structural engineer. I built bridges and skyscrapers that defined the Chicago skyline. I negotiated contracts worth millions of dollars facing down men who thought less of me because of the color of my skin. I buried my wife. I raised a daughter. And my son-in-law in the dining room of the house I bought was serving me trash in a bucket. I didn't look at him. I looked at my daughter, Aisha, my only child. She was sitting right next to him, twirling the stem of her wine glass. She didn't look horrified. She didn't look ashamed. She wasn't jumping to my defense. She giggled. It was a high-pitched, nervous sound that cut right through my chest, worse than any knife. She was playing to her audience, to these friends of his I didn't know. Then she spoke, and her words were the final turn of the key in the lock. "Dad, you should really get used to it," she said. She wasn't even looking at me. She was looking at the woman across from her sharing the joke. "Now that Kyle isn't working, we have to cut back. And this is what your food is going to look like from now on. Freeloader." Freeloader. The word echoed in the sudden silence. It hung in the air heavier and fouler than the smell of the slop. Freeloader. Me. Morgan Price. A freeloader. My mind, usually so orderly, flashed back. It wasn't a memory, it was a reel of receipts and sacrifices clicking through my head fast and sharp. Me, sitting in a lawyer's office just 2 years ago, right after my beloved wife Diane had passed from this world. I remember the smell of the stale coffee and the heavy silence as I signed the papers. I was selling my house, the brick bungalow in Southside Chicago, the house where Diane and I had raised Aisha from her first steps to her college graduation. The house we had paid off brick by brick with my sweat and her quiet, unshakable strength. I sold that house, and I took every single penny of the profit, $400,000, cash, and I bought this house. This 5-bedroom, 3,000-square-foot colonial in suburban Naperville. I bought it for them. I put the deed in my name. I was old, not stupid. I thought it was the smart thing to do, a safety net for my old age, a legacy for my daughter. I thought I was giving Aisha the start in life I never had. I thought I was fulfilling Diane's dying wish to take care of our girl. Aisha had beamed when she saw it. "Oh, Daddy, it's perfect. It's our dream house." And then the first twist. "But it's so big, Daddy. Kyle and we'll need our privacy to start a family. You understand? Would you mind, just for a little while, staying in the attic room?" The attic room. Not a bedroom, a room, an uninsulated, Unfinished cold space with a sloping ceiling where a 72-year-old man had to stoop to get to the cot they had placed in the corner. I agreed. For my daughter. For the memory of my wife. For family. And now sitting at the mahogany table in the formal dining room of the house I paid for with the bricks of my own life, I was being called a freeloader. By the daughter I had given everything to. Kyle pushed the bucket again, the plastic scraping. "Eat up, old man. Eat the slop." His friends were watching me. Their faces were a blur of amusement and discomfort. They were waiting to see what the old black man would do. Would I yell? Would I cry? Would I reach into that bucket? I looked down at the bucket. Then I looked at Kyle, really looked at him. His weak chin, his watery blue eyes. Then I looked at Aisha. She finally met my gaze. Her eyes were cold, empty of the girl I used to know, the one who used to sit on my lap and listen to me read her stories about Anansi the spider. That girl was gone. I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't the explosion of anger Kyle wanted. It wasn't the pathetic display of tears he expected. It was a click. A cold, hard, precise click. Like a structural support locking into place. The fog was gone. I slowly, deliberately folded my cloth napkin. I placed it on the table next to the plate I hadn't touched. I pushed my chair back. The heavy legs scraped quietly, deliberately on the hardwood floor. "I'm full," I said. My voice was even. It was quiet, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear. I stood up. I am not a small man, and I stood to my full height. I looked down at my daughter one last time. "I am full." I walked past the silent guests. I walked out of the dining room, my back straight. I didn't run, I didn't shout, I didn't look back, I just left. I went up the main staircase, my hand on the banister I had helped stabilize. I went up the second narrow staircase to the attic. The third step from the top creaked. It always did. I knew the sound well. Up here, the sounds of the party downstairs were distant. Just a dull, throbbing bass and the occasional shriek of laughter. It was cold. It was always cold. I could see my breath clouding in front of my face. The single bare bulb in the ceiling cast long, weak shadows. I sat on the edge of the narrow cot. The mattress was thin. I could feel the metal slats underneath me. I didn't pack right away. I just sat there in the silence and the cold. I wasn't angry. The anger was gone. I wasn't even hurt anymore. The hurt had been burned away by the word freeloader. What I felt was clarity. For the first time in 2 years since Diane died, the fog I had been living in, a thick, heavy fog of grief and guilt and a desperate, lonely obligation, it just evaporated. It was gone. I saw exactly what my daughter was. I saw exactly what her husband was. And I saw with perfect, terrible clarity exactly what I had become to them. I wasn't a father. I was a resource, a bank account to be drained. And now that the account was running low, I was a burden. A freeloader. An old man in the attic to be mocked for sport at a dinner party. A cold resolve settled over me. This was not the end of my story. This was the end of their story. I pulled my old leather suitcase from under the cot. It was dusty. It was the one Diane and I had used on our 25th anniversary trip to Savannah. The leather was worn, but the latches were still strong. I opened it on the cot. It smelled faintly of her perfume and old books. I started packing. It didn't take long. I didn't have much up here. My few changes of clothes. My toiletries from the small cracked bathroom sink, my blood pressure medication. I was careful with that. I reached for the small silver-plated frame on the rickety nightstand. It was a photo of Diane and me on our wedding day, 1975. She was so beautiful, her smile so warm it could melt the Chicago winter. I held the photo and a wave of pain finally hit me. Not for me, for her. "We have to take care of Aisha Morgan," she had whispered to me in the hospital room. Her hand was so light in mine. "She's our girl. Promise me you'll take care of her." "I'm sorry, Diane," I thought as I carefully wrapped the photo in a thick wool sock. I tried. I really, really did. My trying flashed before my eyes clearer, now sharper. It wasn't just the house, it was the endless bleeding drain of money that followed. It was Kyle 6 months after they moved in. He'd lost his office job. He came to me cap in hand, full of tears and righteous anger. "It was a misunderstanding with management, Morgan," he'd sniffled. "They just had it out for me." I later found out from a friend of a friend that misunderstanding meant padding his expense reports. Embezzlement, they called it. He was lucky he wasn't charged, but he came to me. I'm drowning, Morgan. For Aisha's sake, I've got $30,000 in credit card debt. They're going to ruin us. I just need a fresh start, a clean slate. Aisha had stood beside him, her eyes big and pleading. Please, Daddy. For us. I was still grieving. I was still trying to honor my promise. I went to the bank. I wrote the check. $30,000. My retirement buffer. Gone. Then it was Aisha's turn. About 8 months ago, her passion project. A high-end online fashion boutique. Daddy, it's a sure thing, she'd gushed, showing me mock-ups on her laptop. I have the vision. I just need $15,000 for the inventory and the website development. It's an investment. I'll pay you back double in a year. I looked at my savings. It was almost all gone. But this was my daughter. This was Diane's girl. Maybe this would give her purpose. Maybe this would finally make her happy. I emptied what was left, $15,000. The website went live. It failed in 3 months. The inventory boxes and boxes of expensive dresses and handbags was probably still stacked in the garage directly below me. $400,000 for the house, $30,000 for his debt, $15,000 for her failed dream, a total of $445,000. And I was the freeloader. Because my $700 a month Social Security check, which I used for my own food and medicine, apparently wasn't contributing enough. The attic door creaked open. No knock. They never knocked. It was Aisha. She stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light of the hall. She was still holding her wine glass, now half empty. She didn't look sorry. She didn't look concerned. She looked annoyed. "What are you doing?" she asked. Her voice was sharp. "I'm packing," I said, placing the last of my sweaters in the suitcase. "You're packing." She scoffed a short, ugly sound. "Oh, come on, Dad, don't be so dramatic. You're ruining the party. You really embarrassed me down there. Everyone is asking what's wrong." I stopped. I turned to look at her. "I embarrassed you." "Yes," she snapped. "You made everything so awkward. Kyle's friends are here. This was supposed to be a celebration. He served me garbage in a bucket, Aisha." "It was a joke, Dad. God, you're so sensitive. You always have been. Kyle's friends are just... they have a dark sense of humor. You wouldn't get it." "And you," I said, my voice as cold as the room. "You called me a freeloader." She sighed a long, impatient breath. She rolled her eyes. "So, it was just a word. God. Look, Kyle was just trying to make a point. This is his house too, you know? He feels like he's carrying this whole family, and you're not contributing. You just sit up here all day and cost us money." The lie was so stunning, so complete, so breathtakingly dishonest that I couldn't even argue. There was no point. The person I was talking to was a stranger. He who hadn't held a job in over a year. He who was living off the equity of my life's work. He was carrying the house. I just zipped the suitcase. The sound was loud, rough, final. It echoed in the small, cold room. "Fine, Aisha," I said. I stood up, grabbed my worn wool coat from the hook. "I won't be a freeloader anymore. I'm leaving." I walked toward the door. I expected her to argue, to plead, maybe even to cry. For a split second, I thought she would move. I thought she would block my path. I thought I would see a flicker, just one spark of the little girl I raised. She didn't move. She just watched me, her eyes narrow. Then she stepped aside, pressing herself against the wall to let me pass. As I walked past her, she said one last thing. "Don't forget to leave your key." I stopped. I was in the hallway now. I didn't turn around. I couldn't look at her face again. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the single key to the front door, the key to the house I had bought. I opened my hand, and I let it fall to the floor. It landed with a small metallic clink on the hardwood. I walked down the narrow attic stairs. I walked down the main staircase past the dining room where the laughter and the loud music had already resumed. I walked to the front door. I put my hand on the doorknob. I stepped out into the cold Thanksgiving night. The air was sharp and clean. I left my key. I left my daughter. And I left my $400,000 house behind me. But I wasn't defeated. I wasn't broken. I was free. And as I walked to my old Toyota Camry parked on the street, I already had a plan. I turned the key in the ignition of my 10-year-old Toyota. The engine turned over with a quiet, reliable hum. It was the only reliable thing in my life. The cold of the November night bit at my face as I pulled away from the curb. I did not look back. I did not care if Aisha was watching from the window. I drove. I had no destination. I just drove the suburban streets of Naperville, slipping by like a dream. Perfectly manicured lawns, big, empty houses, all dark. I drove past a park where I used to push Aisha on the swings. The memory did not bring pain. It brought nothing. I was numb, but it was a sharp, clear numbness. The fog of grief for Diane, the fog of obligation to Aisha, it was all gone. All that remained was the cold, hard reality of that mop bucket. The reality of the word freeloader. My hands were steady on the wheel. I was not shaking. I was not crying. I am a structural engineer. My entire life was about calculating stress and load, about finding the breaking point. I had just found mine. And I had not broken. I had simply shifted. After an hour, I was on the highway. A glowing green sign appeared through the darkness. Motel 6. It was cheap, impersonal, and available. It was perfect. I pulled off the exit and into the nearly empty parking lot. The lobby was painfully bright, lit by fluorescent tubes that hummed. The man behind the plexiglass looked bored. He took my card without looking at my face. I was just a transaction. It was a relief. Room 112. The key was a plastic card. The room smelled of stale smoke and harsh cleaning chemicals. The carpet was thin. The comforter on the bed was a rough, ugly brown pattern. I placed my single suitcase on the rack. I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress sagged under my weight. I did not turn on the television. I just sat in the humming silence of the cheap air conditioning unit. I stared at the stucco wall. I replayed the scene, the faces of Kyle's friends, the smirk on his face, the giggle from my daughter. Eat the slop, freeloader. Each word was a hammer blow, not breaking me, but forging something new inside, something hard. I did not sleep. I watched the darkness outside the thin curtains turn to a weak gray light. It was Friday, Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. The world was about to erupt in a frenzy of shopping, fighting over televisions. They were fighting for discounts. I was about to be fighting for my dignity. I stood up. I walked to the cheap mirror bolted to the wall. I looked at my reflection. I saw a 72-year-old black man. His eyes were tired, but they were not defeated. They were clear. They were focused. This was not going to be my end. I would not be erased. I would not be a freeloader. I would not capitulate. I would act. My resolve was set. I stood at the window of the Motel 6 looking out at the parking lot. People were starting their cars, heading out to the Black Friday sales, chasing bargains. I was chasing something else. I was chasing my life. I picked up my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. There was only one person in the world I could call. One person who had known me longer than my own daughter had been alive. Amos Green. Amos and I started at the same engineering firm in Chicago back in 1970. We were two young, ambitious black men in a sea of white faces and blue-collared shirts. We learned to trust each other, to check each other's calculations, to have each other's back. We built bridges together for 40 years. He knew my wife Diane before I even married her. He was the godfather to my Aisha. He was 70 years old, retired like me, and stubborn as a mule. He was my best friend. I dialed his number from memory. He lived on the south side, still in a house not far from the one I had sold. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was a familiar, gravelly rumble. "Morgan, what in the hell are you calling me for this early Happy Thanksgiving, brother?" "Happy Thanksgiving, Amos," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow. The fake cheer in Amos's voice died instantly. He knew my voice better than anyone. "Morgan, what's wrong? Is it your health? Are you okay?" I'm at a Motel 6 off the highway." "A what?" he shouted. "A motel on Thanksgiving weekend. Did something happen with Aisha? Did that good-for-nothing husband of hers?" And the words just came out. I told him. I told him everything. I started with the dinner. I told him about Kyle's 10 friends, the table, the wine, and then I told him about the bucket. He brought a bucket to the table, Amos. A plastic mop bucket. "A what?" Amos's voice was tight. "A bucket, full of scraps. Potato peels, burnt food. He called it slop. He pushed it at me in front of everyone." There was a dead silence on the line. I could hear Amos breathing a slow, heavy sound. "And Aisha?" he asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. "Where was my goddaughter in all this?" I had to close my eyes. This was the hardest part. She laughed, Amos. She giggled. She told me to get used to it. I took a breath, the shame and humiliation washing over me again, hot and acidic. And then she called me a freeloader. In the house I bought. She called me a freeloader. I finished the story. I told him how I packed my bag, how she didn't stop me, how her last words to me were, "Don't forget to leave your key." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for a long, long time. It was not a weak silence. It was the heavy, compressed silence of rage. When Amos finally spoke, his voice was not the gravelly rumble I knew. It was a sharp, cold piece of steel. "He gave you slop," he said, each word like a nail being driven into wood. "And she, Aisha, the girl I bounced on my knee, she called you that. In the house you paid for with Diane's legacy." "Amos, I don't know." "You know what that is, Morgan." Amos cut me off, and now the anger was boiling over. "That's not just disrespect, that's evil. That's a sickness. To humiliate a 72-year-old man, their own father, in front of strangers. To treat you like an animal. I have half a mind to go over there right now and show that little punk Kyle what a real man's fist feels like." "No, Amos, that's not why I called." "I know why you called," he barked, pulling himself back. Amos was an engineer, a problem solver. His anger was a tool, and now he was focusing it. "Morgan, stop. Stop talking. I need you to answer one question, just one, and you better have the right answer or so help me God." "What?" "That house, the big new house in Naperville, the one you drained your life savings for. Whose name is on the deed when you signed those papers? Whose name did you put down?" He was holding his breath. I could feel it. I stood up a little straighter in that cold, cheap motel room. A small, cold surge of power, the first I had felt in 2 years, went through me. "Mine, Amos," I said. My voice was clear. "Only mine. My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage. My name is on the title. It's my house." Amos let out a long, slow breath. It sounded like a victory. "Good," he said. The gravel was back in his voice, but now it was grinding stone. "That's good. That changes everything. Now you listen to me, Morgan Price. You are not a freeloader. You are a homeowner. You are a landlord, and we are about to serve an eviction notice." "An eviction notice," I repeated. The words sounded foreign, harsh. "Amos, I can't just throw my own daughter out onto the street. She's still Aisha. She's my girl. Is she?" Amos's voice was sharp as broken glass. "Is she the girl we knew, the one who won the state science fair? The one we taught how to ride a bike right there on the sidewalk? Or is she the woman who sat there, watched her husband hand you a bucket of garbage, and then called you a freeloader?" I was silent. I had no answer. He was right. "Morgan, listen to me," Amos said, his voice softening just a fraction, but still full of that structural steel I knew so well. "You and we worked in this city for 40 damn years. Do you remember 1978? That foreman on the downtown tower project, the big blonde guy from Texas? Looked a lot like this Kyle kid, probably. Remember what he used to call us when he thought we couldn't hear?" I remembered. The memory was sharp, a scar I hadn't looked at in years. He said we were affirmative action hires. Said our degrees weren't worth the paper they were printed on. He tried to sabotage our work. He kept losing our revised specs. "That's exactly right," Amos said. "And what did you do? Morgan? Did you cry? Did you go hide in the attic? Did you let him call you a freeloader? No. You stayed up for 2 nights straight. You went back over his load calculations. You found the error that would have cost that company millions, maybe cost lives. You walked into that boardroom full of white men in expensive suits. You put your numbers on the table and you didn't say a word. You just waited. And they saw. They all saw." He paused, letting the memory sink in, letting it work on me. "You faced down racist, arrogant, powerful men for your entire career, Morgan. You won with your brain. You won with your dignity. You are not going to let this soft, unemployed, blonde-haired boy break you. You are not going to let him and your daughter, who has clearly lost her damn mind, take your dignity. You did not work your entire life just to be fed slop in a motel room, not on my watch." A fire I thought had died long ago, a small, hot coal of resolve sparked in my chest. He was right. This wasn't about revenge. This was about respect. The same respect I had fought for quietly and relentlessly my entire adult life. "Okay, Amos," I said. My voice was stronger now. "Okay, what's the plan?" "Good," Amos said. The satisfaction in his voice was immediate. "Now you're not just going to walk in there. That's what they expect. They expect you to cool off, run out of money, and come back begging hat in hand. We're not doing that. We are going in with a weapon. And I know just the one." "A weapon, Amos? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about a lawyer. But not just any lawyer, Morgan. You're not calling one of those slick downtown firms that will charge you $1,000 to write a letter. You are calling Evelyn Reed. You ever heard of her?" I had not. "Evelyn Reed," Amos said, and I could hear the grim, satisfied smile in his voice. "She's a shark, Morgan, a great white in a tailored suit. She's a black woman about 50 years old, and she eats men like your son-in-law for breakfast. She specializes in elder abuse and real estate law. She hates, and I mean she hates, entitled young people who prey on their family. She's the best, and she's going to tear them apart piece by piece, all nice and legal." He gave me her number. "Call her now, Morgan, today. Tell her Amos Green sent you. Tell her everything. Don't you dare leave out a single detail, especially the bucket. She'll like that part." I spent the weekend in that Motel 6. I ate cheap diner food. I did not call Isha, and she did not call me. The silence from her phone was as loud as the insult at the dinner table. By Monday morning, I was no longer a grieving father. I was a client. I drove my Camry into downtown Chicago. The city I helped build rose around me, all steel and glass. I parked in a garage that cost $40, and I didn't even blink. I was done worrying about money. I was focused on justice. Evelyn Reed's office was on the 30th floor of a glass tower overlooking the river. The lobby was all marble and hushed, expensive silence. Her office itself was not large, but it was powerful. The walls were lined with books, not just law books, but history books, books by black authors. A beautiful abstract painting hung behind her desk. And then there was Ms. Reed. She was a woman in her early 50s, radiating an intelligence and a no-nonsense authority that filled the room. She was impeccably dressed in a dark blue suit. She was a strong black woman, the kind who had navigated the same worlds I had, and had clearly come out on top. She stood up when I entered. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp and assessing. They did not miss a single detail from my worn coat to the determined set of my jaw. "Mr. Price," she said. Her voice was smooth but had an edge of tempered steel. "Amos Green speaks very highly of you. He said you have a real estate matter." "I do," I said. I sat in the leather chair opposite her desk. I did not waste time with small talk. I had spent 2 days rehearsing this. I opened my old briefcase. "Ms. Reed," I began, "I am a 72-year-old widower. 2 years ago, I sold my family home in Southside. I slid the first document across her desk, the closing statement. I used the proceeds," I continued, "to purchase a new home in Naperville for my daughter and her husband to live in. I slid the second document across the purchase agreement for the $400,000 house. I tapped the signature line. The deed is exclusively in my name. I am the sole owner." Her eyes scanned the paper. She nodded, her face impassive. "Go on." "I have been living with them in an attic room for 2 years. I have also assisted them financially." I slid the third document onto her desk. It was the bank statement showing the $30,000 wire transfer to Kyle's bank account. The memo line clearly read, "Loan for debt consolidation." "And," I said, placing the fourth document down, "I funded a business venture for my daughter. The $15,000 transfer to Aisha's Designs, LLC. And this Thanksgiving," I said, my voice quiet, "my son-in-law handed me a mop bucket full of table scraps and told me to eat the slop. And my daughter called me a freeloader." I finished. I had laid all my weapons on her desk. Evelyn Reed was silent. She looked down at the pile of paper. The $400,000 purchase, the $30,000 transfer, the $15,000 transfer. She lined them up, creating a neat, damning pile. She did not look angry. She did not look sympathetic. She looked surgical. She steepled her fingers and looked at me, her eyes now holding a cold, focused fire. "Mr. Price," she said, "thank you for being so organized. This is not a family squabble. This is a clear-cut case of financial elder abuse and an illegal tenancy." She picked up the purchase agreement. "You are not a freeloader, Mr. Price. You are the landlord, she said it again. You are not a freeloader, Mr. Price. You are the landlord. You are the sole legal owner of the property located at 123 Maple Drive, Naperville, Illinois. The words felt like a lifeline. I had been drowning for 2 years in a sea of guilt and obligation, and she had just thrown me a steel cable. She tapped the purchase agreement. Your daughter Aisha and her husband Kyle have zero ownership interest in this property. Zero. They are not on the deed. They are not on the title. But they live there, I said. My voice sounded weak even to my own ears. It was the voice of the man in the attic. It's their home. No, Mr. Price, she corrected me instantly. Her voice was not harsh, but it was absolute. It was the voice of a surgeon stating a fact. It is your home. You have been allowing them to live in it. In the eyes of Illinois law, they are what we call tenants at will. They have no lease. They have no rental agreement. They have no rights of survivorship. They are essentially long-term guests. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. Guests who have dramatically overstayed their welcome and are now quite clearly abusing the host. This was a new language. Landlord, tenants at will, host, elder abuse. It was cold. It was hard. It was the language of contracts, of blueprints, of right angles and stress tolerances. It was a language I understood. It was a world away from the murky, gray, guilt-ridden language of family that I had been trapped in. What about all the money? I asked, pointing at the bank statements. The $30,000 for his debt, the $15,000 for her fantasy business. Does that count for anything? Ms. Reed smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who has just picked up the scent. Oh yes, Mr. Price, she said, picking up the statements. It counts for a great deal. This is what we call leverage. This is our proof. You didn't just give them a place to live, which is a gift of $400,000. You actively subsidized their entire lifestyle while they treated you with contempt. You paid off his debt. You funded her failed business. And in return, as a thank you, they call you a freeloader. I leaned back in the expensive leather chair. The reality of it all, laid out so clinically, was heavy. It was shameful. Ms. Reed, Evelyn, she is my only child. My wife Diane. She passed 2 years ago. On her deathbed, she made me promise. Take care of Aisha, she said. She's our girl. That's all I've been trying to do. I felt the old pull. The suffocating weight of that promise, the guilt, the obligation. I don't want to destroy her. I don't want to see her and her husband out on the street. I'm 72 years old. My voice cracked. I was ashamed of it in front of this strong woman. I just want them to respect me. I want them to see me. I want them to understand what they did. The bucket. A man shouldn't be treated like that, not by his own blood, not in his own house. I looked out the window at the Chicago River far below. I felt like that old man in the motel room again, tired, alone. I just wanted a family, I whispered. After Diane passed, I was so alone. I thought buying the house, having them close, I thought it would be a new beginning. Not this. Evelyn Reed let the silence sit in the room for a moment. She let my pain hang in the air, let it fill the space between us. Then she punctured it. Mr. Price, Morgan, she leaned forward, her voice dropping, becoming intensely personal. Diane asked you to take care of your daughter. She did not ask you to let your daughter destroy you. There is a profound difference. She tapped the bank statements. This isn't taking care. This is enabling. This is financing their disrespect. You have given them $445,000 of your hard-earned money, your wife's legacy, and in return, they gave you a bucket of garbage. She said that word garbage with such profound clinical disgust that it jolted me. You asked for respect, Mr. Price. Let me tell you something I have learned in 30 years of this practice. Respect is not given to those who beg for it. It is not handed out because of love or family ties, not to people like this. It is taken by those who command it. Right now they see you as a doormat, a wallet, an ATM machine that has finally run dry. The only way to get respect from people like your daughter and son-in-law is to show them the teeth of the law, to show them that their actions have real, undeniable, life-altering consequences. Oh, she let my words hang in the air. You just wanted a family. Evelyn Reed stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. She was done being gentle. "Morgan, I'm going to be very blunt with you," she said. Her voice was flat. All the surgical precision was gone, replaced by a cold, hard slap of reality. "Your daughter watched her husband hand you a bucket of pig slop, and then she called you a freeloader. She called the man who bought the $400,000 house she sleeps in, the man who paid off her husband's $30,000 debt, the man who funded her $15,000 fantasy, a freeloader. Do you understand? The words she used were a weapon. They were designed to humiliate you, to diminish you, to put you in your place. They were telling you that you are worthless to them beyond your bank account, and now that it's empty, you are less than human. You are an animal to be fed from a bucket." Every word was a small, sharp blow. She was dismantling my last defense, my desperate hope that this was all a misunderstanding. "You say you want respect," she continued, "but you cannot get respect from people who have none for you. You cannot get love from people who are only capable of taking. You are sitting here, a 72-year-old man, a respected engineer in my office, trying to find a way to make your abusers love you." That word, abusers. It was the final click. The one I had felt in the attic, but now it was a steel bolt locking into place. The fog was gone. The grief was gone. The guilt was gone. All that was left was the cold, clear structure of the problem. Diane's promise. "Take care of Aisha." Ms. Reed's words. "She did not ask you to let your daughter destroy you." I looked at the documents on her desk. The $445,000, my life's work, my wife's legacy, being turned into slop in a bucket. I looked up from the papers and met Evelyn Reed's gaze. The old, tired, grieving man was gone. The engineer was back. "I don't want their respect anymore," I said. My voice was quiet, but it did not tremble. "I don't want their love. It's not real. It's a liability." "Good," she said, nodding slowly. "Now, what do you want, Mr. Price? What is the goal?" I thought for a moment. I thought of the attic room. I thought of the key I dropped on the floor. I thought of the cold motel room. "I want them out of my house," I said, "and I want to sell it. I want to sell that house, and I want to wash my hands of this entire chapter of my life. I want to be done." A slow, satisfied, and dangerous smile spread across Evelyn Reed's face. The shark was back, and I had just given it blood. "An excellent decision, Mr. Price. Clear, precise, and final. I like it. Here is how we are going to do it." She leaned forward, all business now. The plan unfolded. "Now, we can't just go over there and change the locks. They are tenants even without a lease, and that would be an illegal eviction. We do this by the book. We will be cleaner than they could ever be. First," she said, "under Illinois law, because they are family and have no lease, we must give them a 30-day notice to quit. This is a formal legal document that officially terminates their right to be on the property. After 30 days, if they are not gone, we file for a formal eviction in court and have the sheriff remove them. It's simple." She held up a hand. "But we have a problem. You described your son-in-law as emotional. I would describe him as vindictive and childish. The kind of man who serves his father-in-law a mop bucket is the kind of man who, when served an eviction notice, will take a hammer to the drywall. He will pour concrete down the drains. He will destroy your $400,000 asset just to spite you." A cold chill went down my spine. She was right. "So," she continued, "we will not give them the chance. Before we serve the 30-day notice, we will go to the courthouse. Tomorrow. We will file for an immediate temporary restraining order. A TRO. I will argue to the judge that you are a vulnerable elderly homeowner and that your abusive tenants, based on their documented behavior, the bucket, the $45,000, the freeloader comment, pose a clear and present danger to your property. The order will forbid them from touching, damaging, destroying, or removing any property from that house. Not the television, not the sofa, not the refrigerator you paid for, nothing." This was the conflict chain Amos had talked about, one legal action leading to the next. "This is the plan," she said, her voice final. "We will not call them. We will not warn them. They are sitting in your house right now, probably drinking your wine, laughing about the old man. They expect you to run out of money. They expect you to come crawling back begging for your attic room. They will never expect this. Tomorrow is Tuesday. At 9 a.m., you and I will get the TRO signed by a judge. At 11 a.m., we will drive to Naperville. We will not go alone. We will be accompanied by a professional process server and a uniformed deputy from the county sheriff's office. The drive to Naperville on Tuesday morning was different. I was not driving away in shame. I was driving toward something. I was driving toward my life. I wasn't in my old Toyota. I was in a black town car arranged by Ms. Reed. I was not alone. I met them at a coffee shop a mile from the house. There were 3 of us, me, a man in a simple windbreaker who was the professional process server. He was all business, and a deputy from the county sheriff's office. He was in his full uniformed authority. Ms. Reed had arranged it all. He was there to keep the peace. We pulled up to the curb at 11 a.m. sharp. The house I had bought, the one I had fled in the dark, looked different in the bright, cold morning light. It just looked like property. We walked up the pathway. I didn't have a key anymore, so I pressed the doorbell. I heard the faint chime inside. Seconds later, the door was pulled open. It was Kyle. He was shirtless, wearing pajama pants, his hair a mess. He was holding a video game controller. He stared at me, his eyes wide with surprise. Then his surprise melted into that familiar, arrogant smirk. He saw me, then he saw the 2 men standing behind me. "Well, well, well," Kyle said, leaning against the doorframe. "Look who's back, the old man. What's the matter, Morgan? Run out of hotel money? Finally come to your senses." He tried to look tough, but his eyes kept flicking to the uniformed deputy. He didn't understand what was happening. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. The process server stepped forward. He was holding a thick manila envelope. "Are you Kyle?" he asked, his voice flat and professional. "Yeah, what's it to you?" Kyle snapped. The process server looked past him. "And is the woman in the living room Aisha Price?" Aisha's voice called out, "Kyle, who is it?" She appeared behind him in her bathrobe, her hair wrapped in a towel. She froze when she saw me. Her face went pale. "Dad? What? What is this?" The process server didn't wait for an answer. He extended the envelope to Kyle. "Kyle and Aisha Price, you are being legally served." Kyle just stared at the envelope. "Served? What the hell is this? I'm not taking that." "You don't have to take it, sir," the process server said. He dropped the envelope at Kyle's feet. "You have officially been served." Aisha bent down, her hands trembling, and picked it up. Kyle snatched it from her. He ripped it open. He pulled out the stack of papers. He stared at the first page. His face went from confused to pale to a deep blotchy red. Notice to quit," he stammered. 30 days. What is this, a joke?" He flipped the page. "A temporary restraining order." He burst out laughing. It was a high-pitched, ugly sound. "A restraining order? You're restraining me in my own house. You're crazy, old man. You're senile." He laughed, but the sound was high-pitched and brittle. "You're crazy. You're senile. You can't restrain me. This is my house." Aisha was staring at the papers, her face a mask of white, terrified confusion. "Dad, what is this? What does this mean? Notice to quit?" Kyle threw the papers onto the floor. "It means he's lost his mind, Aisha. He thinks he can kick us out. He's just throwing a tantrum because of Thanksgiving. He'll cool off. He's just an old man trying to scare us." This is where I spoke. For the first time since that horrible night, I spoke to them. My voice was quiet. It was steady. It was not the voice of the man from the attic. "It's not your house, Kyle," I said. They both froze. "It has never been your house," I continued, my voice clear and cold in the morning air. "It is my house. I bought it. I paid for it. And I am ordering you to leave it." Kyle's face contorted. The blotchy red turned into a deep, furious purple. He took a step toward me, his fists clenched. "You old bastard," he hissed. "You ungrateful old—" "Sir." The deputy, who had been standing quietly by the walkway, stepped forward. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the air like a razor. It was pure board authority. Kyle stopped. He hadn't really registered the uniform until that very second. The deputy gestured to the papers on the ground. "Sir, I am here to ensure that these documents are served peacefully. I am not here to interpret them for you, but that first document is a lawful 30-day notice to vacate the premises." "Vacate," Aisha whispered. Her voice was trembling. "Vacate like move out?" "Yes, ma'am," the deputy said, his gaze still fixed on Kyle. "And that second document," the deputy continued, is a temporary restraining order signed by a judge this morning. It forbids you and you, ma'am," he nodded at Aisha, "from damaging, altering, or removing any property from this residence. This includes but is not limited to furniture, appliances, and electronics." Kyle looked like he was going to explode. "He can't do that. The TV, the new sofa, I bought that stuff." "Then I'm sure you'll be able to prove that in a court of law, sir," the deputy said, his face impassive. "But as of 11:02 a.m., this order is in effect. If you are seen removing any items, you will be in violation. If anything is damaged, you will be in violation. Do you understand?" "This is insane!" Kyle yelled, turning to me. "You're just going to throw your own daughter out on the street, your only family." "Family," I said. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. "Is that what we are, Kyle? Is that what you were thinking about on Thanksgiving?" I took a step forward. The process server and the deputy stayed back. This was my moment. "Was that family when you slid a mop bucket across the table?" I asked. My voice was low, but it carried. "Was that family when you served me garbage and told me to eat the slop?" Kyle's face went from red to white. He had no answer. He looked around as if searching for his friends, his audience. But they were gone. I turned to my daughter. She was crying now, silent tears rolling down her face. But they were not the tears of remorse I had once prayed for. They were the tears of a child who had just had her favorite toy taken away. "And you, Aisha," I said, "was that family when you laughed? When you called me a freeloader in the house I paid for? The house I bought to fulfill a promise to your dead mother?" "Dad, I didn't mean it," she whispered. It was just a joke. It was Kyle, You are 30 years old, Aisha." I cut her off. "You are an adult. You made your choice. You chose him." I pointed to Kyle, "And you chose to treat me like trash. And choices have consequences." I looked back at Kyle. "You called me a freeloader. You said I wasn't contributing. Well, I've decided you're right. I'm not going to contribute anymore. Not to your debt, not to your lifestyle, and not to your housing." I turned my back on them. I did not want to see their faces anymore. "Mr. Price," the process server said, "we're done here." I'm calling a lawyer," Kyle screamed from the doorway. "You can't do this. We have rights. We'll sue you. We'll sue you for everything." I stopped. I turned back to look at him one last time. He was standing on the porch of my house, shirtless, threatening me with my money. "You do that, Kyle," I said. "You go right ahead and call a lawyer. I'm sure they'll be very interested to see the bank statements for the $45,000 I've already contributed to your life. I'm sure they'll be fascinated by the story of the mop bucket." I nodded to the deputy. "Thank you for your time, officer." I walked away. I walked down the stone path, got into the back of the waiting town car, and I did not look back. The door closed, shutting out their shouts, and we drove away, leaving them standing on the porch of a house that was no longer their home. It was just a property, and the clock was ticking. Kyle tore the restraining order in half, then he tore the 30-day notice. He threw the pieces of paper onto the porch like confetti. "Paperwork," he spat. "You think a few pieces of paper can scare me? You think you can just kick us out of our house?" He laughed, a sharp barking sound. "You're pathetic, old man. This is our home. We live here. You gave it to us. You can't just take it back because you're in a bad mood." Aisha was nodding beside him, her face tear-streaked but defiant. "He's right, Dad. You gave us this house. It was a gift. You said you wanted us to be happy." "You're right, Aisha," I said. My voice was calm. It cut right through Kyle's yelling. "I did want you to be happy. I bought this house so you could have a good start." "See?" Kyle yelled, jabbing a finger at me. "He admits it. It's our house. Now get off our property before I call the cops on you for harassment." The deputy sheriff, who had been silent, sighed. He took one step forward. It was a slow, deliberate step that changed the entire dynamic on the porch. "Sir," the deputy said to Kyle, his voice heavy with boredom, "tearing up the documents does not make them invalid. You have been legally served." "And you," I said, locking eyes with Kyle. "You seem to be confused about the word gift. I never gave you this house. I bought this house. I bought it with my money from the sale of my home. The home I shared with my wife for 40 years. I took a step closer onto the bottom step of the porch. I was on my property. The deed, Kyle, is in my name. The title is in my name. The mortgage which I paid off in cash was in my name. This is not your house. This is my house. I let the words sink in. Aisha's face went from defiant to a sickly pale white. She understood in that moment what I was saying. Kyle was slower. You're lying, Kyle stammered. Aisha, is he lying? He put it in our name, right? Aisha couldn't speak. She just stared at me, her mouth open. She knew. She had always known. She had just counted on me being the old sad, guilty father forever. I never signed any transfer papers, Aisha. I said, my voice soft but firm. I never signed anything over to you. I let you live here as my daughter in my home, and you in turn treated me like a servant. You exiled me to the attic, and then you treated me like an animal. So no, Kyle, I said, my voice rising just a little strong and clear. I am not just kicking you out. That's not the full story. What are you talking about? Aisha whispered. I am kicking you out, I said, because I am selling this house. I am selling it, and I am taking my money, my wife's legacy, and I am getting it as far away from you two as I possibly can. That was the blow that finally landed, the idea of losing the house. Aisha didn't just cry, she crumpled. She let out a high, wailing sob. No, Dad, you can't. Please, where will we go? We have nowhere to go. Please, Dad, no. This was not the cry of remorse. This was not, I'm sorry for the bucket. This was, where will I live? What about my $400,000 house? She grabbed Kyle's arm. Kyle, do something. Tell him. Tell him you'll get a job. Tell him we're sorry. Kyle was just staring at me, his mouth opening and closing. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, naked panic. He finally understood. He had no power here. He was just a freeloader after all. Please, Dad, Aisha cried, stumbling down the steps toward me. Don't do this. I love you. I looked at her. I looked at her tears, and I felt nothing. Just the cold, clear peace of a decision made. I turned my back on her. You have 30 days, Aisha, I said. I suggest you don't waste them. I did not go back to the motel. Amos had insisted I stay with him at his house on the south side. It felt good to be in a real home, a place of warmth and strength, surrounded by a true friend. My phone started ringing an hour after we left Naperville. It was Aisha. I was sitting at Amos's kitchen table, a cup of strong hot coffee in my hands. I looked at the screen. Her picture, smiling on a day long past, lit up. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 30 seconds later it rang again, and again, and again. For 2 solid hours my phone vibrated on the table, a constant frantic demand for my attention. Then the text started. Dad, pick up the phone. What did you do? They said we have 30 days. Dad, this isn't funny. Please call me. Kyle is going crazy. You can't do this to us. I am your daughter. I read each one. I felt nothing. It was like reading a weather report about a storm in a city far away. Amos looked at the buzzing phone. She's desperate, he said. She's inconvenienced, I replied and took a sip of coffee. The calls continued all night. I put the phone on silent. The next day, Wednesday, they continued. A barrage of panic. Then around noon on Wednesday, the calls stopped. Just silence. That's new, Amos said, looking at the quiet phone. They're making a new plan, I said. The silence lasted for the rest of the day. It was almost peaceful. On Thursday morning, my phone rang again, but this time it was not Aisha. It was Evelyn Reed. Good morning, Morgan, she said. Her voice was crisp and energized. It seems our tenants have made a move. What happened? I asked. I just received a call from an attorney, a Mr. Harrison. It seems Kyle and Aisha have hired legal representation. They are disputing the notice to vacate, and they are demanding an immediate mediation. A lawyer. They had actually hired a lawyer. What does that mean for us? I asked. I could hear the smile in Ms. Reed's voice. It means they've fallen right into our trap, Morgan. Their lawyer knows they don't have a legal leg to stand on for the eviction. So he's going to try to bully us into a settlement. He's going to argue that you morally owe them something. He's going to try to get you to let them stay or to pay them to leave." She paused. "I have scheduled the mediation meeting for tomorrow morning, Friday, 10 o'clock, here in my conference room. Friday morning, 10 o'clock. I walked into Evelyn Reed's main conference room. I was wearing my best suit, the one I had saved for funerals and weddings. It felt appropriate. Amos had driven me. He was waiting in the lobby, a silent guardian. They were already there. They were sitting on the opposite side of a long, polished mahogany table that reflected the Chicago skyline like a dark, cold mirror. Aisha, Kyle, and a man I assumed was their lawyer. Aisha looked terrible. Her eyes were red and swollen, puffy from 2 days of crying. She was pale. She wouldn't look at me. She just stared at her hands, which were twisted together in her lap. She looked like a child who had been caught. Kyle, on the other hand, looked angry. He was wearing a shirt and a tie that looked too tight for him, choking him. He was trying to project confidence, but his leg was bouncing under the table, a rapid, frantic rhythm of fear and rage. He glared at me when I walked in. The look in his eyes was pure hate. Their lawyer, a man in his late 30s with slicked-back hair and a cheap-looking suit, introduced himself as Mr. Harrison. He stood up and gave me a smile that was all teeth. It was a salesman's smile. He was a shark, but a small one, a bottom feeder. He didn't know he was in a tank with Evelyn Reed. Ms. Reed entered last. She was the picture of calm, controlled power. She carried no briefcase. She held a single, perfectly organized accordion file. She placed it on the table in front of her. She nodded to Mr. Harrison. "Gentlemen, Ms. Price, shall we begin?" Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, puffing himself up. He was performing. "Thank you, Ms. Reed, Mr. Price, for agreeing to this mediation. My clients, Kyle and Aisha, are frankly devastated. Shocked." He gestured to Aisha's tear-stained face as if she were Exhibit A. "They feel this entire situation is a tragic misunderstanding, a temporary emotional outburst from a grieving family member." He turned his oily gaze on me. "Mr. Price Morgan, may I call you Morgan Morgan? No one wants to see a family torn apart. No one wants to see a 72-year-old man, alone, or his only daughter and her husband, well, vacated from their home." I just stared at him. I didn't nod. I didn't speak. I let the silence hang there. He pressed on his smile, tightening. "What we are proposing is an amicable solution, a path forward. We are prepared to overlook this unfortunate legal action in exchange for a fair agreement. We can draft a new occupancy agreement, a new lease, if you will, something that recognizes the significant contributions my client, Mr. Kyle, has made to the maintenance and upkeep of the home." I almost laughed. I almost choked. Significant contributions. The man who hadn't worked in a year. The man who sat on a sofa I paid for playing video games on a TV I paid for. The man who drank my wine and ate my food, Ms. Reed, who had been listening patiently, her hands steepled, raised one finger. It was not a hand, just one quiet, elegant finger. It stopped Mr. Harrison cold mid-sentence. "Contributions," Ms. Reed said. Her voice was as smooth and cold as the tabletop. "That's a fascinating word, Mr. Harrison. I'm glad you brought it up. I was hoping we could discuss your client's contributions in detail." Mr. Harrison's smile faltered. This wasn't in his script. Evelyn Reed reached into her accordion file. She didn't fumble. She didn't search. She knew exactly where everything was. She pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it across the table. It glided over the polished wood and stopped perfectly in front of Mr. Harrison. "Let's start with this," she said. "This is a bank statement from Mr. Price's personal savings account. It is dated 16 months ago." She slid a second copy in front of Kyle. His eyes darted down. He turned white. "It shows a wire transfer, Ms." Reed continued, "for $30,000 to your bank account, Mr. Kyle." Kyle looked like he'd been slapped. "The memo line, if you'll look closely," Ms. Reed said, reads, "Loan for debt consolidation." Mr. Harrison, was this the significant contribution to the home you were referring to? Or was this, in fact, Mr. Price paying off your client's substantial credit card debt after he was terminated from his last job for, and I quote, "financial misconduct"? Mr. Harrison grabbed the paper. He looked at it, then at Kyle. "Kyle, what is this?" It was a loan." Kyle sputtered, his voice cracking. I was going to pay him back. It was an investment. He offered. I offered. I said. My first words. They came out like stones. You came to me and said you were being ruined. I offered. An investment, Ms. Reed repeated as if tasting the word. Interesting. Well, let's talk about another investment. She reached back into the file. Click. She pulled out a second document. She slid it in front of Aisha. Aisha flinched as if the paper was on fire. She wouldn't look at it. This one, Ms. Reed said, is a transfer for $15,000 from Mr. Price's account to an LLC called Aisha's Designs. That's your company, is it not, Ms. Price? Aisha just nodded, her eyes filling with tears, her whole body trembling. A company, Ms. Reed continued, consulting her notes, that was officially dissolved by the state of Illinois 3 months after this transfer, having registered zero income. A failed passion project, I believe it was called. So to be clear, we have $30,000 to Mr. Kyle. We have $15,000 to Ms. Price. That is $45,000 in direct cash payments, from my client to yours, in addition to the $400,000 house he provided rent-free. Mr. Harrison was no longer smiling. He was shuffling his papers. My clients? This was a family matter. This was family helping family. This doesn't negate the fact that they maintained the property. They did yard work. They kept the place clean. Maintained the property, Ms. Reed said, her voice laced with ice. I was hoping you would get to that. She reached into the file a third time. She did not pull out a single sheet. She pulled out a stack of papers, an inch thick. She dropped it on the table. The thud echoed in the silent room. It sounded like a judge's gavel. What you see here, Mr. Harrison, are the utility bills for 123 Maple Drive for the past 24 months. Gas, electric, water, sewer, waste management, internet. She tapped the top page. All of them, every single one, billed to the property and paid by Mr. Price from his personal checking account. She pulled out another stack, not as thick but just as heavy. And these are the property tax receipts for the last 2 years, also paid in full by Mr. Price. She leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. The trap was set and sprung. My paralegal ran the numbers this morning, she said. Over the last 2 years, your clients have contributed exactly $0 to the financial upkeep of the home. In that same time, my client, in addition to the $45,000 in cash gifts, has paid an additional $11,450 in utilities and taxes just to keep the lights on and the water running for them. She leaned forward. The room was utterly silent. I could hear Aisha trying to muffle a sob. Kyle was just staring, his mouth open, his face a mask of purple rage. Evelyn Reed looked directly at Mr. Harrison. Her voice was quiet, but it was deadly. So you're right. This is a misunderstanding. We were under the impression that my client was the victim. But based on your significant contribution theory, it seems he was simply the bank. She pushed the stack of bills toward him. My client's total documented contribution to your clients is $456,450. Now, Mr. Harrison, you're a smart man. Tell me, what was their contribution? What did they bring to the table? Besides, of course, and her eyes flicked to me, a mop bucket. Mr. Harrison's face was sheet white. He had brought a knife to a cannon fight. Ms. Reed delivered the final blow. My client, the man your clients called a freeloader at a party, was in fact the only person contributing anything at all. So let's stop wasting time. Who exactly is the freeloader here? Kyle's face was a mask of pure, impotent rage. He was trapped. He was exposed. There was no way out. Mr. Harrison just stared at the mountain of paper. He slowly closed his own empty file. He was done. Mr. Harrison just stared at the mountain of paper. He had brought a notepad. Evelyn Reed had brought an arsenal. He slowly, almost imperceptibly, closed his own empty file folder. He had nothing. He was done. He didn't even look at his clients. He just stared at the polished surface of the table, defeated. Kyle was vibrating, his face a mask of dark, blotchy red. He was trapped. He was exposed. He looked like a cornered animal, all his false arrogance burned away, leaving only a weak, pathetic rage. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The silence in the room was absolute. It was broken by a single choked sob. It was Aisha. The reality had finally completely landed. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a temporary argument. This was the end. The house, the money, the subsidized life. It was all evaporating in this cold, bright room. "Dad," she whispered. The word was a wet, broken sound. "Dad, please, please don't do this." She slid out of her chair, her hands clasped in front of her like a child begging. "Please, Daddy. We're sorry. We'll pay you back. Kyle will get a job. We'll do anything. Please." She begged, the tears now streaming down her face. "We have nowhere to go. Where will we live? Please, Daddy, don't." I looked at my daughter. I looked at her tears. These were the tears I had once prayed to see. And now looking at them, I felt nothing. Just the cold, clear peace of a structural certainty. The load-bearing wall of my guilt, the one that had held me prisoner in that attic, had finally crumbled, and I was still standing. "That is not my problem anymore, Aisha," I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the entire room. It was the voice of the engineer, not the father. She flinched as if I had slapped her. "You had a choice," I said, looking her directly in the eye, holding her gaze. "You could have been a daughter, but you chose to be an accomplice. You made your choice. You made it very clear on Thanksgiving." I leaned forward just an inch. "You made your choice the moment you watched your husband hand me that bucket of slop, and you laughed." Aisha let out a high, thin wail of pure, hopeless loss. Evelyn Reed took over. Her voice was crisp and final. "Mr. Harrison, my client is willing to offer one and only one concession. He will not pursue your clients in civil court for the $45,000 in cash they took." Harrison looked up shocked. "In exchange," Ms. Reed said, "your clients will sign this agreement stating they will vacate the property in 15 days. Not 30, 15, and they will leave the property in broom-clean condition. If they are not out by the 15th, or if a single light bulb is broken, the $45,000 lawsuit is filed the next day. Take it or leave it." Harrison looked at his sobbing client. He picked up the pen. "We'll take it," he whispered. On the 14th day, I did not go back to the house alone. Amos came with me. We weren't there to celebrate. We were there with a locksmith and a realtor. The agreement gave them 15 days. We arrived one day early just to see what we were dealing with. I had a new key. The locksmith had made it for me last week. I put the fresh, uncut brass key into the lock of my front door. I turned it. We pushed the door open. They were gone. But the silence they left behind was loud and ugly. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Stale, cold garbage. They hadn't just moved out. They had fled. They had left half-full trash bags sitting in the middle of the hardwood floor, leaking a sticky, unknown fluid. Fast food wrappers, empty pizza boxes, and beer bottles were scattered across the living room. It was a final, petty act of defiance. A last screw you from the people I had housed for 2 years. "My God," Amos whispered, his voice low and angry. "They lived like animals." "They did," I said. I felt no anger, just a cold final confirmation. Then I looked at the living room wall. "They were busy," I said. Amos followed my gaze. The 70-inch flat-screen television, the one I had bought for the house as a housewarming gift for them, was gone. All that remained was the empty mounting bracket ripped partially out of the drywall. The expensive sectional sofa I had also paid for, gone. In its place on the carpet was a dark, greasy stain where it used to be. We walked into the kitchen. It was worse. They had taken the stainless steel refrigerator. They hadn't even unplugged it properly. They had just ripped it out, and a large puddle of water from the disconnected ice maker line was slowly warping the hardwood floor. They had taken the microwave. They had taken the bar stools from the island. They had violated the restraining order. They had stolen everything that wasn't nailed down, everything I had paid for. "The low-life, ungrateful thieves," Amos growled. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Evelyn. We're filing the suit. We'll get them for the $45,000. "It's okay, Amos," I said. He looked at me, his face a mask of disbelief. "Okay, Morgan, they stole from you after everything. They just proved who they really are," I said. I looked at the empty space where the refrigerator used to be. "They're just things. Let them have the things. It's the price of my freedom." I wasn't angry. I was just done. I felt nothing for the stolen TV or the sofa. It was just metal and fabric. "Let's check the attic," I said. I want to see if they left anything of mine. Amos and I slowly climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. My old room. It was colder up here than the rest of the house. The single bare bulb was still on. They had left in a hurry. Unlike downstairs, they hadn't stolen anything from here, because there was nothing to steal. Just the cheap cot, the rickety nightstand, and the thin blanket. They had left their trash here too. Empty soda cans, more fast food bags. A final insult leaving their garbage in the room I had slept in. "There's nothing here, Morgan," Amos said, his voice gentle. "Let's go. Let's lock this place up and call the cleaners." I nodded. I was about to turn, but then I saw it. On the floor, half hidden under the cot, was a silver frame. I bent down and picked it up. It wasn't my photo of Diane. I had that with me. It was Aisha's wedding photo, the big expensive 8x10 from her wedding day. It was the photo of the four of us standing together. Me in my best suit. Diane alive and beautiful in her blue dress, so proud. And next to her, the space was empty. The photo had been ripped. Violently. Torn in half. Aisha and Kyle were gone. She had physically torn herself and her husband out of the photograph. All that was left in the frame was the part with me and my late wife Diane. It was a bizarre, almost insane act. A final, pathetic, confusing message. She had destroyed the image of her new life, leaving only the image of the old one. I stared at this torn piece of my past. This was all that was left. Not a family. Just a ripped photograph in a cold, empty room. As I stood there holding this strange, sad artifact, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen lit up the dim attic. The name on the screen was Aisha. She was calling me, right at this very second. Amos looked at the phone. He looked at the torn picture in my hand. He didn't say a word. I looked at her name. I looked at the ripped photo at the jagged edge where my daughter used to be. I saw the mop bucket. I heard the word freeloader. I didn't hesitate. I didn't agonize. My thumb moved to the side of the phone. I pressed the button. The screen went dark. The ringing stopped. I had declined the call. I dropped the torn photo frame onto the pile of garbage they had left behind. It landed with a dull thud. "You're right, Amos," I said. "There's nothing here." We walked out of the attic. I closed the door, and I never, ever looked back. 3 months have passed. I do not wake up to the creak of floorboards above a garage. I do not wake up in the cold. Today I wake up on the 22nd floor of a building in downtown Chicago. My apartment is not large. It is just one bedroom, but the windows are floor to ceiling. They face east. Every morning the sun fills this room with a bright, clean light. It is warm. The radiators hiss quietly, a sound of comfort, a sound that reminds me I am not in a cold attic waiting for a bucket of scraps. The house in Naperville is gone. It is sold. My realtor, Ms. Reed's colleague, was a sharp, no-nonsense woman. She was horrified by the state Aisha and Kyle had left the property in. "Mr. Price," she had said, her voice tight with disgust, "it looks like spiteful squatters lived here, not family." I just told her to hire the best cleaning crew she knew. I told her to hire painters. I told her to replace the stolen refrigerator and fix the drywall where Kyle had ripped the television mount from the wall. "Just send me the bill," I had said, and I paid it. I paid for the damage, I paid for the mess, I paid for the things they stole, and I paid it all out of the proceeds of the sale. I didn't care. It was just money. It was the final tax. It was the price of my freedom. I signed the closing papers 2 weeks ago. I never had to see them again. The money, my $400 thousand, or what was left of it, is back where it belongs. It is in my bank account, under my name, untouchable. It is no longer a weapon to be used against me. It is just my retirement, my security. Amos helped me find this apartment. It's a rental. I am a tenant, and I pay my rent on the 1st of the month. It feels more like home than that 5-bedroom suburban prison ever did. I am back in the city I love. I am back in the city I helped build. I can stand at my window with a hot cup of coffee, and I can see the steel skeletons of bridges I designed. I am a part of this city. I am not an exile. My photo of Diane sits on a solid walnut bookshelf next to my engineering texts. The silence here is different. It's not the lonely, cold silence of the attic. It is the peaceful, chosen silence of a man who is finally truly on his own terms. I'm not just a tenant here, I'm a member of a community. But more importantly, I'm a founder. I met with Evelyn Reed again, not as a client, but as a partner. We took a significant portion of the money from the sale of that house, and we created something new, something powerful. It's called the Diane Price Scholarship Fund. It's a fund dedicated to supporting young, gifted African-American women from Chicago's South Side who want to study engineering. It's a legacy. It's a bridge. It's a way to turn the pain of my wife's death and the ugliness of what followed into a promise for the future. It's a way to ensure that Diane's name is remembered for strength and opportunity, not for the greed of the daughter who forgot her. My life is quiet now, but it is full. I have coffee with Amos. I mentor a young student from the scholarship fund. I read my books. I am at peace. Then yesterday, a letter arrived. It was not a bill. It was not junk mail. It was a simple, cheap envelope addressed in messy, familiar handwriting. It was from Aisha. It was the first time she had tried to contact me since that day in the lawyer's office. I opened it. It was not a card. It was a single sheet of notebook paper torn from a spiral. It said, "Dad." It said, "I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't blame you if you don't. I had to write it. Kyle and I are living in a small studio apartment. He's working at a retail store. I got a job at a Starbucks." She wrote about her new life, a life without a $400,000 house, a life where she had to wake up at 4 a.m. to serve coffee, a life where her husband for the first time had to actually work for a living, a life where they were for the first time truly contributing. Then at the very bottom were the words I had waited 2 years to hear, the words I thought I needed. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for the bucket. I'm sorry for what Kyle did, and I am so sorry that I ever called you a freeloader." I read the letter. I read it twice. I felt a quiet sadness, not for me, but for her, for the daughter I had lost. I folded the letter neatly. I did not cry. I did not feel a rush of forgiveness. I just felt an ending. I have lost my daughter. But I have found myself. I am Morgan Price. I am an engineer. I am the founder of the Diane Price Scholarship. I am not a freeloader. I am a man who, at 72 years old, finally learned that you cannot build a life on a foundation of guilt. I put the letter in a drawer. I will not be answering it. I walked to my window. I looked out over the city, my city, as the lights began to come on. Life goes on. This story teaches us a hard but vital lesson. True family is built on mutual respect, not one-sided sacrifice. Your dignity is not a resource for others to consume. Enabling bad behavior in the name of love or family only destroys both. Setting a boundary is not an act of cruelty. It is a necessary act of self-preservation. It is never too late to stand up, reclaim your worth, and teach others through clear and final consequences how you deserve to be treated. What did you think of Morgan's final decision? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between your family and your own self-respect? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe that everyone deserves dignity, please like this story and subscribe for more just like it.